speaker, Chris Rowe, is the Chief Executive Officer of the California STEM Network, who I've had the good fortune to work with over the past 2 years as California has set upon a set of actions to build a robust STEM education system through regional networks. Chris Rowe, please join us.
Thank you, Nancy. It's it's a pleasure to be here this morning. I was just thinking back to 2 years ago when we first met with Rick, and we went out for margaritas, which was great. It was a great way to be introduced to San Diego. And I knew I was in San Diego, yes, and we had this really great discussion about the terrific leadership that San Diego Science Alliance has had in the region over probably a 15-year period, is that right? But that Nancy and Rick really wanted to take this to the next level and really had a bigger vision about what would happen. And as I look in front of me this morning, I think I see that vision actually happening. So I just want to congratulate you on the leadership and congratulate everybody in this room for being here today and for having that energy to take this forward to the next level. We had our California STEM Summit last fall here in San Diego, which brought together about 300 statewide leaders to really talk about this vision and how we were going to advance our work. We had a terrific time. Again, San Diego was a terrific host and really shows why they're considered a state leader in STEM education. So I wanted to just tell you a little bit about CSLNet. We were founded 2 years ago to really help bring together the leaders around the state to create a statewide agenda for STEM education. And our mission is to really ensure that California as a state produces the nation's most STEM-capable graduates. We have a long ways to go towards achieving that mission, but it's groups like yours here in San Diego that are really helping to lead that charge. And you've got terrific leadership in this region. We also are working with a number of regions around the state, and I think we'll talk more about this today, that also have a lot of tools and resources available. And what we're doing is helping to connect all those regions to be sharing best practices, sharing tools. So our group in Silicon Valley is sharing out resources and tools. Our group in the Sacramento region has very strong strengths in career technical education, bringing them together as a collective which has more impact than just any one single region. Similarly, at the national level, we're partnering as one of 16 and growing numbers of states who are partnering together with an organization called STEMX. It's the Association of State STEM Networks that are all, similarly, this notion of networks, sharing resources and tools, and really connecting to the national level. Which brings me to my last point before I turn the program over. Our federal budgets just came out recently, and I was really excited, and there's been a lot of discussion among the STEMX partners. The federal STEM budgets, which are allocated at $3 billion, had a $250 million allocation for STEM innovation networks, which is really exciting. These are really designed on the premise of the regional networks, like this one, that have had impact on really moving the needle regionally. So we're talking with the federal government about how those dollars might be allocated, and we're hoping that in the discussions in Washington, D.C., which can drag on, but we're hoping that that will actually move out and become a reality to support regions around the state and around the country that are doing great things in STEM education. But as I thought about that $3 billion investment, I was flying in last night on United Airlines, and in their flight magazine, of all things, there's a story called Geek Tragedy: Is America Falling Behind in the Production of Brainiacs? And it talks about STEM education. So when you make it in United Flight magazine, I think you know you've come someplace. But a couple of the factoids that they shared: rank of the U.S. among developed nations in proportion of STEM bachelor's degrees, 27th. We've got a ways to go. Projected economic gains over 80 years if the U.S. matched Canada's math proficiency, $75 trillion. And then the third one, which having grown up in Wisconsin, I kind of related to, annual U.S. federal investments in STEM education, $3 billion, as I just mentioned. Annual amount Americans spent on beer in 2011, $96 billion. So So 3 billion seems like a lot, but when you put it in perspective, maybe it's not so much. But if we are going to move the needle, federal investments are important, but it's really at the local level where people are investing their hard dollars, their research, their sweat equity, their partnerships is where we're really going to make the difference. And I know you've got a great group here today. I'm really excited to see so many students in the room, to see your higher ed partners, to see your business and industry partners. Together, everybody can have a much bigger impact than just working in unison. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to one of our national partners as well, Klaus Van Zostro, who's with the Change for Equation group in Washington, D.C. We actually held a meeting yesterday in Silicon Valley at Symantec with the superintendent, Tom Torlakson, and with business leaders to talk about how business in particular can be really supportive of this agenda. So Klaus, I know your group is doing some great things in Washington, D.C., so I'll invite you up to share a few words with the group.
Thanks very much, Chris. I'm delighted to be here in San Diego today. I can tell you the weather here is way, 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 way better than in Washington, D.C. And I know you hear that a lot, and I know it gets tiresome to hear that, but for those of us who fly in only once in a while, it's overwhelming. So I had to share that. It's interesting because I've seen from the agenda that you're going to speaking today about a collaboratory, and of course, Chris and his predecessors this morning have spoken a lot about the importance of networking and collaborations. Obviously, that's the glue that's really holding you all together. Change the Equation is also a kind of collaboratory of sorts. We're a partnership of almost 100 CEOs of mostly Fortune 500 companies who are all dedicated to improving STEM learning. And we came together about the same time, actually, as CSLNet, so towards the end of 2010, because they were convinced they could get a lot more done working together than they would working separately. So one of the things that they've done that I hope might be helpful to the group as a whole and perhaps individuals within it is we created a set of principles for quality in STEM program. We call them design principles for effective STEM programs. And the idea was that these principles would become something that these groups could rally around, that the companies could decide they would try to align with, at least in part, so that they have a better sense that all the work that they're doing, and together we figured out they invest somewhere north of $750 million a year just in K-12 STEM programming, less than the $3 billion federal investment, but still, you know, nothing to sneeze at. And if that money were invested with a little more purpose and intention, it might actually move the needle. So we've created those principles, drawing on the expertise of our member companies. We created a rubric that goes along with it to help people apply the principles, whether they be funders or program designers or educators or whoever. And we worked with WestEd, an esteemed California organization, just, well, a lot of miles up the road. I keep forgetting how big California is, but yes, I'm still in California, though. And they've created a database of programs that, according to their rigorous review, measure up to these principles, and it's searchable. And the idea is to make these tools very readily available. They're free, they're open online, you don't need to register or anything, so that people can begin to get a sense of where they might invest not only their money, but their energy and their time, and how they might change or adapt the own work that they do to make it more effective. So I was very pleased to see that you seem to have an effort underway that's very similar, and that is the quality criteria for out-of-school STEM programs. Because our experience has been that that kind of work is extremely important, and it's a really nice magnet that organizes a lot of efforts around it in our experience. So just feel free as a group to think of Change the Equation as a resource if you need us. We're very helpful. Yes, we are helpful. We're very grateful for the opportunity to help. And I also wanted to just loop back for a minute again about the urgency of this in California as in other states. Even though there is so much talent and energy in rooms like this, obviously you know that you have a good distance to travel, but there's also great opportunity. At Change the Equation, we did a state-by-state analysis of a lot of STEM data to figure out where states stood in K-12 education and learning. And we found on the opportunity side that in California, during three pretty tough years economically, sluggish years between 2009 and 2012, in California there were about 1.5 STEM job openings for every unemployed person in STEM. So that's not particularly bad odds in a sluggish economy. When you turn to non-STEM jobs, it was basically 5 unemployed people for every job in California. So it really shifted the odds if you had a STEM background in California. That's a lot of opportunity, especially for young people right now in the system who aren't getting access to those kinds of jobs. That's a door that's going to be closed to them. On the flip side, I mean, I was very grateful that the organizers slipped this into your packet with the California data that we have. But I wanted to talk about one little piece of data in here that always is striking for me in California, and that is the amount of time elementary schools spend on teaching science. And we found that in California, on average, children in grades 1 through 4 get less than 2 weeks of science instruction per week. WestEd did a similar study that came to similar conclusions. And in California, children in grades 1 through 4, on average, get less than 2 hours of science instruction a week. Yeah, less than 2 hours. And that's a big drop from what it was in 1994 when it was about 3 hours. There's been a big decline in the amount of exposure that elementary kids have in science. This is just one indicator, right? But it is also, I think, an indication of the challenge that a group like this one faces as they put science really back on the agenda and they make STEM a priority in California. Given the amount of talent in the state and in this room, we have no doubt that you're going to be turning the tables very soon.
Great resources, and the first of many you're going to acquire today. And speaking of resources, you know, the San Diego Science Alliance is a nimble nonprofit organization that doesn't have a brick and mortar, but we do have an address, and that's where Cindy Martin went to this morning. Cindy, would you please join us and accept my apology for sending you to our post office?